What's up guys, it's Matt here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the hypothetical matchup that is in the works right now, Alex Pereira versus Khamzat Chimaev. This is a very interesting matchup because you have two fighters that fight in completely opposite styles. You have Alex Pereira, who many people believe is the best striker in the UFC with good anti-grappling defense, and then you have Khamzat Chimaev, who many people believe is the best wrestler in the UFC with good striking to set up his takedowns. And as weird as this may sound, this might be the UFC fight with the most contrasting styles ever made. And we're going to be doing a deep analysis on the fighting styles of both Alex Pereira and Khamzat Chimaev, and I will be explaining who I think would win this hypothetical matchup because there are rumors that this fight is being talked about, and we don't know how legit the rumors are, but we know that this fight can possibly happen. Before we get into the analysis of this fight, I just want to say that Alex Pereira should be fighting Magomed Ankalaev. So if this fight does not get made, the UFC and Alex Pereira are definitely in the wrong because they are holding up the light heavyweight division. In my opinion, Pereira versus Chimaev should only be made if Pereira beats Ankalaev, because at that point, Pereira would have basically cleaned out the whole light heavyweight division for the next 6 months to a year. And if Pereira fights Chimaev first, then I think it's fair to say that Alex Pereira is officially ducking Magomed Ankalaev. The weird thing about this, though, is that I think that Khamzat Chimaev is a way harder fight than Magomed Ankalaev for Pereira. So it's like Pereira is choosing to duck an easier opponent to fight a way harder matchup. So I don't know if Pereira has something against Magomed Ankalaev, but I just think it's weird that he's choosing to fight the harder opponent over the easier stylistic matchup. Because we all know that Magomed Ankalaev, he's not going to wrestle as much as Khamzat Chimaev. And to be honest, Magomed, he's more of a striker than a wrestler. So that's going to favor Alex Pereira more than it's going to favor Magomed Ankalaev on the feet. And another thing I want to mention about this matchup is that I don't have a problem with Khamzat Chimaev going up and fighting for the belt. The UFC already made Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis, so Khamzat Chimaev might just be looking for a fight in the meantime to stay active, because Dricus or Sean Strickland, they won't be able to fight again until July or August. The only risk that is involved with Alex Pereira versus Khamzat Chimaev is that if Chimaev loses against Pereira, basically all of Chimaev's hype is going to evaporate when he goes back down to challenge for the middleweight title. I'm assuming that this fight is going to be happening at 205 pounds in the light heavyweight division, but I can be wrong. Like I said, this whole matchup is based on rumors. I just think it's unlikely that Pereira is going to move down to 185 again. It just makes more sense that Khamzat Chimaev is going to go up to the light heavyweight division. So when I do the analysis of this fight, I am assuming that the fight is happening at light heavyweight. So without further ado, let's get into the analysis of Alex Pereira versus Khamzat Chimaev. When I'm analyzing this fight, I'm going to be talking about the main aspects that are going to be in play when this fight is going to happen. So that is going to be Alex Pereira's striking, Alex Pereira's takedown defense and anti-grappling defense, and Khamzat Chimaev's wrestling, and Khamzat Chimaev's ability to strike with Alex Pereira to set up the effective wrestling. So those are going to be the main talking points of this video. So starting with Alex Pereira's striking, Alex Pereira, his striking is a unique blend of precision, power, and calculated aggression. His striking is heavily influenced by his kickboxing background. His stand-up game is centered around his ability to control the distance and dictate the pace using his large frame and reach advantage to create significant striking opportunities. Pereira is particularly adept at using his jab and left hook, often leading with his long, powerful left hand to set up his devastating knockout shots. His ability to throw punches and combinations with little telegraph makes him unpredictable, and his timing is exceptional. In his most recent fight against Khalil Rountree, We saw his timing in play in the 4th round of that fight. Alex Pereira entered into an amazing flow state where he was effectively using head movement to dodge punches while throwing consistent offense, breaking Khalil Roundtree, and finishing him with body shots in the middle of the 4th round. Pereira is also very patient when he fights. He often waits for openings for his opponents to make mistakes so he can land those knockout shots. Combined with his timing, this makes Pereira a monster to deal with in the light heavyweight division and the middleweight division. Pereira is also a master at staying calm under pressure. This allows him to work methodically through his opponent's defense and makes his strikes more effective over time. Another one of Pereira's most lethal weapons is his leg kicks, which serves as both an offensive weapon and a defensive weapon. His kicks are executed with precision and power, making them a constant threat to his opponents. The way he uses his low kicks to disrupt his opponent's rhythm is a key aspect of his striking strategy. These kicks that he throws are often set up by a jab or can be used as a counterattack. The way that Alex Pereira swings his leg when he throws his leg kicks makes it very difficult for his opponents to check because he throws with very little telegraph. He swings his leg almost like a pendulum, and it allows for him to connect shin to calf on his opponent's legs, and it's hard for his opponents to exactly check those type of leg kicks because they come at such a fast speed and with very little telegraph. When these leg kicks are put into effect, this impairs his opponent's mobility and posture. And when he pairs it with his feints, Pereira's leg kicks can create a unpredictable attacking rhythm, furthering complicating the decision-making process for his opponents. Not only does Pereira have very good low kicks, he has very good high kicks as well. Pereira's high kicks are equally dangerous, and this shows his striking versatility. He does not shy away from using these kicks to create damage and often disguises them behind his hands or head movement. For example, Pereira, he knocked out Yuri Prochazka that same way. Because his low kicks are so devastating, Yuri Prochazka, he was not expecting for Alex Pereira to all of a sudden just blast a high kick to the head. And because Yuri Prochazka did not see that shot coming, that is what effectively knocked him out and ended that fight in an amazing highlight reel finish for Alex Pereira. Another aspect of Alex Pereira's game that makes him well-rounded is his grappling defense. While it is not as polished as his striking, his ability to maintain distance and avoid being taken down is largely attributed to his superior clinch game, balance, and understanding of controlling the pace of the fight. When faced with grappling pressure, Pereira demonstrates solid takedown defense and often sprawls well, using his size and leverage to create space. He is also capable of defending against trips and attempts to control his posture, as seen in his fights against wrestlers and grapplers. However, while his takedown defense is respectable, Pereira does not actively seek out scrambles or engages in high-level submission defense, relying more on his ability to get back to his feet to neutralize the threat with his superior striking. His ability to avoid prolonged grappling exchanges and quickly return to his striking game is what allows him to remain a dangerous threat even when faced with a grappler's pressure. Now moving on to Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev's wrestling is one of the most dominant aspects of his skill set, combining relentless pressure, unmatched physicality, and a highly effective takedown game. What makes his wrestling particularly dangerous is his ability to chain together multiple takedown attempts, overwhelming his opponents with a non-stop barrage of attacks. His wrestling style is built on relentless forward pressure, often taking the fight to the ground with a seamless transition between clinch work, trips, and body locks. Chimaev's approach to closing the distance is aggressive. He utilizes a combination of striking, head fakes, and clinch entries to take opponents off balance and off guard. Chimaev's takedown game is not just about timing, it's about controlling the pace of the fight from the very beginning, wearing down his opponents, and forcing them into positions where they are unable to recover or defend effectively. For example, in Khamzat Chimaev's most recent fight, he forced Robert Whittaker, who is primarily a striker, to just be on the ground for the entirety of that fight. Robert Whittaker was not able to get any offense off on the feet, and even though the fight lasted only like 2 minutes, Khamzat Chimaev forced Robert Whittaker to be in a position where he's not comfortable, and that allowed Khamzat Chimaev to submit Robert Whittaker in the first round. Chimaev's most unique attribute of his wrestling style is his ability to shoot takedowns from unique, unusual angles and distances, making his takedowns often difficult to defend or stuff. Chimaev, in my opinion, has the fastest blast double leg in the sport. And that's what makes his wrestling so interesting, because his shot is so fast and so low. Like, back to that Robert Whittaker fight, Khamzat Chimaev, he was shooting takedowns at his ankles and securing them. And because he shoots so low, it's difficult for the defenders to get the underhooks and successfully stuff Khamzat Chimaev's shot. Chimaev does not rely solely on traditional setups like face or level changes. Instead, he can shoot from mid-range or counter an opponent's movements, closing the gap rapidly and locking onto his opponent's body with an iron grip. Khamzat Chimaev, he has the ability to chain together many takedowns after brief exchanges on the feet. Most fighters in the UFC, they have to wait for the perfect opening to attempt takedowns. But Khamzat Chimaev, that's what sets him apart from the average wrestler in the UFC. And that is his ability to wrestle even though there is not a perfect opening for him to do so. Chimaev, what makes him such a good wrestler is his immense physicality advantage over his opponents. Especially when you look at his fights in the welterweight division, he was huge. In his fight against Li Jingliang, he was picking him up, and Li Jingliang, he had almost no defense to counter that wrestling because Chimaev was simply just too big for him to handle. And Chimaev, he still has that physicality advantage in the middleweight division, and I think he's still very physically dominant in the light heavyweight division too. Even though he is not bigger than Alex Pereira, Khamzat Chimaev, he is not undersized in this matchup. When you look at Alex Pereira's previous opponents like Khalil Roundtree, Khamzat Chimaev, he's taller than Khalil Roundtree, and he only has a 1-inch reach disadvantage to Khalil Roundtree. So Khamzat Chimaev, he is in no way undersized when he is fighting Alex Pereira. Now, we've been talking about Khamzat Chimaev's wrestling, but what really makes him a lethal finisher is his jiu-jitsu skill set. His wrestling can only take him so far, but when you combine that with his amazing jiu-jitsu skill set, that's what makes him such a dominant force on the ground. And if you just look at the accomplishments of Alex Pereira versus Khamzat Chimaev, it's weird that Alex Pereira is the one with the jiu-jitsu black belt and Chimaev has the brown belt, but obviously Chimaev's jiu-jitsu is on a whole different level than Alex Pereira. I believe that Alex Pereira's black belt in jiu-jitsu, it helps him understand how to defend against really good wrestlers and grapplers, but Alex Pereira's Brazilian jiu-jitsu is not even comparable to the skill set of jiu-jitsu that Khamzat Chimaev possesses. Even though Khamzat Chimaev is a lower ranking in belt, his jiu-jitsu is something that Alex Pereira, I believe that he has never faced in his entire career. And this next level jiu-jitsu of Khamzat Chimaev allows him to always have very dominant top control over his opponents and allows him to unleash devastating ground and pound when he has mount on his opponents as well. Now, when you look at Khamzat Chimaev's striking, I think that his striking is also very good. He has very good power, and this complements his dominant wrestling style because it makes his opponents never safe wherever the fight goes. Like, Khamzat Chimaev has some of the best submissions in the UFC, but he also has a lot of good knockouts in the UFC as well. He knocked out Gerald Meerschaert under 2 minutes, I believe. It might be under a minute, but that was an amazing knockout that showcases how much power that Khamzat Chimaev has in his hands. Chimaev, he has a lot of creativity in his striking. He has good overhands. He has good uppercuts. He knocked out Ikram Aliskerov with a uppercut in the regional scene. That wasn't a UFC fight, but that is a good win to have over a rising UFC prospect. But Khamzat Chimaev, he has always had devastating power in his hands. And I think that if this fight happens, Alex Pereira, that is going to be something that he is going to be worried about. Because Alex Pereira, even though he is the superior striker, obviously, Chimaev's striking is something to worry about. Because like I said, Chimaev, he is a dual threat kind of fighter. Like, he's not just a wrestler and he's not just a grappler. He's also a very good striker. He can be a knockout artist when those moments present themselves. But Alex Pereira, he definitely needs to be wary about Khamzat Chimaev's striking. Although there is one aspect of Khamzat Chimaev's striking that you could criticize, and that is his striking defense. There have been moments in his fights, such as that Gilbert Burns fight, where Khamzat Chimaev, he looked kind of reckless with his striking, and he took very powerful blows flush on his chin. I remember there was a moment in that Gilbert Burns fight where it looked like Gilbert Burns actually spun Khamzat Chimaev's head around because of how flush he connected on Khamzat's chin. And you could say that those moments showcase that Khamzat Chimaev, he has a good chin and can take punches. But let's be honest, when you're fighting Alex Pereira, no one has a good chin. Yuri Prochazka, people say he had a good chin. Alex Pereira knocked him out twice. Jamal Hill, people said he had a good chin. Alex Pereira knocked him out. So no fighter has a good chin when they're facing Alex Pereira. And just looking at prior history, Alex Pereira can exploit Khamzat Chimaev's striking defense if he wants to, because Alex Pereira is the superior, more technical striker on the feet. So Chimaev's defense in his striking is there to be exploited. So to put it simply, Alex Pereira is going to try and keep this fight standing, and Khamzat Chimaev is going to try and take this fight to the ground. Now, for who I think wins this fight, I am picking Khamzat Chimaev somewhat confidently. And I have 3 reasons why I think Khamzat Chimaev wins this hypothetical matchup. Firstly, I believe that Khamzat Chimaev's wrestling is better than Alex Pereira's striking. When you compare how they performed against their previous opponents, Alex Pereira, he had competition on the feet. For example, Israel Adesanya, in their first fight and second fight, they gave him problems on the feet. And also, Jan Blachowicz gave him problems on the feet as well. And when you look at how Khamzat Chimaev eviscerated his opponents using his grappling, there have been no opponents that I've seen that Khamzat Chimaev faced that has been able to even compete with the wrestling of Khamzat Chimaev. And I think that Pereira won't be able to use his striking to effectively neutralize the wrestling threat and grappling threat of Khamzat Chimaev. Now, my second reason why I believe Khamzat Chimaev wins this matchup is that, like I said before, Khamzat Chimaev is not going to be undersized in this matchup. So Alex Pereira, he's not going to have that massive size and frame advantage like he has over most of his opponents. Khamzat Chimaev, he's comparably the same size as Alex Pereira. I believe that Khamzat Chimaev is listed at 6'2" and Pereira is at 6'4", and Pereira, he is gonna have that reach advantage. I believe Pereira has an 80-inch reach and Khamzat Chimaev has a 75-inch reach. But even though those factors are at play, like I said before, Khamzat Chimaev, he's not going to have this massive physicality and frame disadvantage like Alex Pereira had over most of his opponents at middleweight. And I believe that Khamzat Chimaev, he's going to be able to wrestle Alex Pereira and take him down pretty effectively. And going back to my first point, I don't believe that Pereira's striking is going to be able to neutralize that wrestling threat when Chimaev is basically the same size as Alex Pereira and can physically manipulate Alex Pereira better than any opponent that Alex Pereira has ever faced. Now, my last reason why I believe that Khamzat Chimaev should beat Alex Pereira is that Khamzat Chimaev is going to have that speed advantage because he is a former welterweight and a former middleweight that is fighting a former middleweight who has settled into the light heavyweight division. So like Lucas Tracy, I believe that the smaller weight classes, they have a advantage when they're moving up a weight class, the lighter man skill advantage. So I think that is going to be at play. And going back to the speed of Khamzat Chimaev, I believe that just physically, when you look at how long and lanky Alex Pereira is, I can just see that when Khamzat Chimaev shoots that blast double leg, I don't think that Alex Pereira is going to be able to effectively get the underhooks fast enough to defend the takedowns of Khamzat Chimaev, just because of how long he is and how much space he has to cover to effectively get the underhooks in the right positions to stuff the takedown. And like I said, Khamzat Chimaev, he has the fastest blast double leg that I've ever seen. And he shoots it really low. He's basically going to be shooting at Pereira's ankles. And like I said, Pereira, he's not going to have enough time to defend that type of shot. So if Khamzat Chimaev beats Alex Pereira, I can see him beating him by like a submission. I can see Khamzat Chimaev controlling Pereira for like most of a round, and then eventually Pereira, he gives up his back or he tries and gets up and it puts him in a worse position. And I can see Khamzat Chimaev capitalizing off of that moment and submitting Alex Pereira. But I can see a world where Alex Pereira does knock out Khamzat Chimaev, or I can also see Alex Pereira beating Khamzat Chimaev by a decision. Because like I said, Khamzat Chimaev, he does have holes in his striking defense. If Alex Pereira can effectively exploit those holes, I believe that Alex Pereira can definitely knock out Khamzat Chimaev just by being the superior striker in this matchup. And I can also see Alex Pereira winning by a decision. For example, Alex Pereira, he does have good grappling defense. So if Chimaev takes him down or controls him for a long time, I believe that Alex Pereira, he does have the skills to effectively just like neutralize the threat in the ground. He might be controlled for a long time, but I can see Pereira being smart and not giving up his back or any other dominant position to Chimaev. So I can see Alex Pereira winning by like a 48-47 decision. But like I said, my prediction for this fight, if it does happen, is Khamzat Chimaev by a submission. I don't really know what round. If I were to pick one on the spot, I would say probably round 2 or 3. But if this fight does get made, I do need to do a little bit more research on how the styles will clash in the octagon. But other than that, that's really the end of this fight analysis. And like I said in the beginning of this video, the UFC, they need to make Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. If this fight gets made without Alex Pereira fighting Magomed first, Alex Pereira, he is officially ducking Magomed Ankalaev. And I believe that Alex Pereira, he should get some flack for that, and the UFC as well, because at the end of the day, the UFC, they are the matchmakers, and the UFC, they need to be pushing Alex Pereira to fight Magomed Ankalaev. He is the #1 contender in the light heavyweight division. He deserves the title shot the most, and if he doesn't get this fight, I believe that Magomed, he has a right to feel some type of way, because it just seems like the UFC and Alex Pereira, they just don't want to give Magomed Ankalaev this title shot for whatever reason.